The whistle of the midnight train cut through the silence of the platform, a low haunting sound that carried both mystery and promise. The coaches stood waiting like long corridors of secrets, their windows glowing faintly against the dark countryside. Armin stepped onto the train with a small bag slung over his shoulder, the faint chill of night air clinging to his coat. He had booked a private cabin at least, that was what he believed. After a long week of restless thoughts, he wanted nothing more than solitude. When he slid the door open, however, he froze. Someone was already inside. A woman sat by the window, her figure outlined in the soft glow of the cabin's golden lamp. Her hair fell loose around her shoulders, catching a shimmer each time the train lights flickered past. She turned slowly, meeting his gaze, and for a heartbeat the world outside seemed to vanish. "I think this is my cabin," Armin said, his voice quieter than he intended. Her lips curved, not quite a smile but something that held its own mystery. "It seems the railway thought differently." She tapped the ticket resting on her lap. "Cabin number 6. He glanced at the number above the door. "Cabin 6. His ticket confirmed the same. For a moment, irritation flickered in his chest, but it was quickly replaced by something else, something unexpected. Perhaps it was the way her eyes lingered on him, steady and unafraid, or the way her presence filled the narrow space with a strange kind of warmth. "Well," he sighed, setting his bag down, "looks like we'll be traveling together." The train jolted, and the cabin door slid shut behind him with a heavy click. The sound felt final, like the sealing of fate. Armin sat across from her, careful to leave space but unable to ignore the electricity that seemed to hum between them. Outside, the dark countryside blurred into streaks of silver and shadow, the rhythm of the wheels creating a steady heartbeat beneath their silence. She studied him openly, her chin resting lightly against her hand. "You don't seem like someone who enjoys company," she said. "And you seem very sure of yourself," he replied, surprised by the edge of playfulness in his tone. Her eyes glimmered. "Perhaps I am." The air inside the cabin grew warmer, or maybe it was just his awareness of her. Every detail seemed sharper, the soft rise and fall of her breathing, the faint trace of jasmine in the air, the way her fingers tapped lightly against the armrest as though keeping rhythm with the train. "What's your name?" he asked, breaking the silence that threatened to consume him. "Selina." Her voice was soft but carried weight, as though each syllable had been chosen carefully. "And you?" "Armin." She repeated it, letting the name linger on her tongue, and for reasons he couldn't explain, it sent a ripple down his spine. Minutes passed, yet neither looked away. The cabin felt smaller now, more intimate, as though the walls themselves leaned closer, urging secrets to spill. Armin found himself wondering who she was, why she was traveling alone at this hour, and why the universe had conspired to place them in the same space. The train swayed gently, pulling them into its rhythm. Their knees brushed for the briefest moment, a simple accident, but neither moved. Instead, a silence heavier than words settled between them. Selina's lips curved again, this time into something unmistakably amused. "Careful, Armin. Long journeys have a way of making strangers forget their boundaries." His pulse quickened at her words. There was no threat in her tone, only temptation, woven with curiosity. He leaned back, trying to appear composed, though his mind was far from calm. "Maybe boundaries are overrated," he said before he could stop himself. Her gaze deepened, searching his, and the faintest blush colored her cheeks. The lamp above them flickered as though in agreement, casting shifting shadows across her face, highlighting the soft contours of her cheekbones, the natural beauty that seemed effortless and real. The night outside stretched endlessly, the train cutting through fields and forests unseen. Inside, two strangers sat inches apart, their words and silences weaving a tension that neither could ignore. Armin wondered what the next hours would bring. Something told him this journey would not end the way it began. The steady clatter of wheels on the tracks became a rhythm, a soft drum beat that seemed to match the strange energy filling the cabin. Hours stretched ahead of them, yet already the night felt different, charged, alive, as though the world outside no longer mattered. Armin leaned back in his seat, pretending to be relaxed, though every sense was heightened. The train swayed gently, and with each motion, he caught the faintest brush of Selena's perfume, jasmine laced with something warmer, something he couldn't quite name. He found himself watching her, not openly, but in stolen glances, the curve of her wrist as she adjusted her scarf, the way her eyes lingered on the window as if the darkness outside whispered secrets only she could hear. "You travel often?" she asked suddenly, her voice breaking into his thoughts. "Not really," he admitted. "I prefer the silence of home. But sometimes, the silence becomes too loud." She tilted her head, studying him with curiosity. "And tonight? Are you running from silence or chasing it?" Armin gave a half smile. "Maybe both." The train rattled over a bridge, and moonlight spilled through the glass, casting a silver sheen across her face. For a moment, she looked otherworldly, almost untouchable, yet something about her presence felt dangerously close. Selena shifted slightly, resting her elbow on the armrest, leaning just enough for the space between them to feel charged. "Trains are strange places," she said. "You're trapped with strangers, but sometimes, in a single night, you learn more about them than people you've known for years." Her words struck him deeper than he expected. There was a challenge in her tone, a daring suggestion that lingered in the air. He chuckled softly, trying to break the tension. "Is that your way of saying you want to know my life story?" "Not all of it," she replied, her lips curving. "Just the part you don't usually tell." Her eyes locked with his, steady, unflinching. He swallowed. Something about her gaze pulled him in, urging him to reveal pieces of himself he usually kept guarded. "I grew tired of routine," he said slowly. "Same streets, same faces, same questions every day. So I thought, why not get on a train and see where it takes me? Maybe I was hoping for something unexpected." Selena leaned back, her smile softening into something warmer. "Then perhaps you've found it?" The words lingered, heavy with implication. Silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It was alive, filled with the weight of everything unsaid. Their eyes met again, and this time neither looked away. The space between them felt smaller, though neither had moved. The train gave a sudden jolt, and Selena's hand brushed against his on the armrest. It was accidental, fleeting, but neither pulled away. Instead, the contact sparked something electric, a shiver that traveled up his arm. Her gaze flicked down briefly, acknowledging the touch, before returning to his. "Careful, Armin," she murmured. "Trains are known for accidents like that." He smirked, though his pulse betrayed him. "Some accidents," he said softly, "don't feel like accidents at all." Her breath caught, just slightly, and for the first time her composure seemed to waver. The cabin light flickered again, shadows playing across her face, accentuating the curve of her lips, the softness of her features. She looked both mysterious and inviting, like a puzzle he desperately wanted to solve. Selena turned her gaze back to the window, though her expression carried a quiet amusement. "You're braver than you look," she said. "Or just reckless," he countered. Her laughter was soft, but it carried warmth, and he realized he wanted to hear it again. The sound filled the cabin like music, easing the tension just enough to make it bearable, yet leaving the spark still burning between them. The night deepened outside, the countryside now invisible in the darkness. Inside, the golden glow of the lamp wrapped the cabin in intimacy, making it feel like its own little world. Two strangers, bound by chance, sat in silence that was anything but ordinary. Armin shifted slightly closer, not enough to cross boundaries, but enough that the warmth of her presence seemed to radiate stronger. She noticed, of course, and her lips curved again, as though she had been expecting it. "Long night ahead," she whispered, almost to herself. "Who knows what we might discover before morning?" The words settled between them, a promise, a temptation. Armin felt the heat rise in his chest, a mixture of curiosity and longing he hadn't expected when he boarded the train. The journey was just beginning, but already, he knew this night would change him. The train thundered deeper into the night, its wheels hammering out a rhythm that seemed to echo the beating of Armin's heart. The countryside outside had vanished into blackness, leaving only the golden glow of the cabin and the strange, magnetic presence of the woman seated across from him. Selina leaned back against the window, the lamplight caressing her features. She was silent, but her silence was louder than words, charged, deliberate, filled with meaning. Armin tried to look away, to distract himself with the shadows flickering across the corridor outside, but his gaze returned to her every time. The space between them felt smaller than before. The cabin, once just four walls of wood and glass, had transformed into something else, a vessel of temptation, a cocoon holding them together in a world where time no longer mattered. "You're staring," she said softly, not unkindly. Armin blinked, caught. Was I? Yes. Her eyes held his, steady and knowing. "And you're not very good at hiding it." Heat rose in his chest. He laughed lightly, trying to mask the intensity that had crept into his gaze. "Maybe I wasn't trying to." Her lips curved into that same mysterious smile. She tilted her head slightly, her hair brushing her cheek as she studied him. "You're dangerous, Armin." The word sent a ripple through him, though he wasn't sure why. Dangerous. No one had ever called him that before. He leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on his knees. Dangerous? Or just honest? Selina's eyes flickered, amusement mingling with curiosity. "Sometimes honesty is the most dangerous thing of all." The train swayed sharply around a bend, and their knees brushed again, this time lingering, neither moving away. The contact was innocent in appearance, but the warmth of it spread like fire, igniting every nerve in Armin's body. He should have shifted back. He knew that. But he didn't. Instead, he held her gaze, waiting. Her breath slowed, steady yet deep, and he noticed the faint rise and fall of her chest beneath the soft fabric of her blouse. The sight pulled at him, subtle but undeniable, and for the first time in years, he felt the ache of longing without disguise. Selina looked away at last, her eyes drifting to the darkness beyond the window. "This cabin feels smaller than it did an hour ago," she murmured. "Maybe the walls are closing in on us," he replied. "Or maybe," she said, turning back to him, her voice lower now, "it's just us making it smaller." The meaning was clear, and it hung between them, heavy and irresistible. Armin's throat tightened. The train roared forward, but inside the cabin, the world slowed. He could hear the faint hum of the lamp, the rustle of her sleeve as she shifted, the quickened beat of his own pulse. Selina, he said quietly, almost as if testing the sound of her name in the charged silence. Her eyes softened at the sound, but her smile remained edged with playfulness. Yes. He hesitated, then shook his head, laughing under his breath. Nothing. Just, wanted to see if you'd answer. She leaned closer, just slightly, the distance shrinking again. Careful. Keep saying my name like that, and you might find me answering more than you expect. The spark leaped higher, undeniable now. Armin's hand rested on the edge of the armrest, inches from hers. For a long, suspended moment, the space between their hands felt louder than anything else in the world. He wanted to reach out, to bridge the distance, to feel her skin beneath his. But he didn't, not yet. The waiting, the restraint, was its own kind of fire. The train rumbled into a storm. Rain lashed against the windows, lightning flashing across the sky, illuminating the cabin in brief bursts of white. The thunder rolled, deep and commanding, as if the heavens themselves echoed the storm inside. Selina didn't flinch. Instead, she turned her face toward him, her eyes gleaming in the flashes of light. "You feel it too, don't you?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. He nodded once, his breath catching. Yes. She didn't move closer, but she didn't move away either. The tension stretched like a wire between them, humming, vibrating, threatening to snap. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, the pull of temptation grew stronger with every breath. Neither of them spoke again for a long while. They didn't need to. The silence said everything. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one building within the walls of cabin 6. And both of them knew it was only a matter of time before the wire broke. The storm outside showed no mercy. Rain lashed against the glass in wild sheets, lightning cracked open the sky, and the train swayed as it powered forward through the darkness. Inside cabin 6, however, the chaos of nature only fed the storm already building between Armin and Selina. Neither had spoken for several minutes, but silence was not emptiness, it was thick, filled with unsaid words, restless glances, and the constant awareness of each other's presence. The lamp flickered again, casting moving shadows across Selina's face. She turned at last, her eyes thoughtful, almost distant. "You know," she said quietly, "I don't usually talk to strangers." Armin smiled faintly. "And yet here we are." Her lips curved, but her gaze didn't soften. "Yes. And here I am, about to tell you something I've never admitted to anyone on a train before." His brows rose. "That sounds serious." "It is." She hesitated, her fingers tracing slow circles on the armrest, as if gathering courage. "I'm not running toward anything tonight. I'm running away." Her words hung in the air, heavier than the thunder outside. Armin leaned forward slightly, his curiosity stirred. "From what?" Selina looked down, her lashes casting shadows against her cheeks. "From a life that doesn't feel like mine anymore. A city that suffocates me. Expectations I never chose." She paused, her voice softening. "Have you ever felt trapped even when you're free?" Armin inhaled slowly. The honesty in her tone cut deeper than he expected. He nodded. "Yes. More times than I'd like to admit." Her eyes lifted to his again, searching. "Then you understand." He held her gaze. "I do. More than you think." The train jolted again, pulling their knees together once more. This time neither shifted back. Instead, the touch remained, warm and deliberate. The electricity between them deepened, but now it wasn't just attraction, it was recognition, the quiet discovery of a kindred soul. Armin's voice lowered. So you boarded this train to escape? Selina gave a small laugh, though it was touched with sadness. Escape, yes. But also to test myself. To see if I'm still capable of feeling something real. Something unscripted. Lightning illuminated her face for an instant, and in that flash, Armin saw something raw in her eyes: vulnerability, longing, and a trace of fear. It stirred something inside him he hadn't felt in years. He leaned closer, his voice steady. You are. She blinked, surprised by his certainty. How can you know that? Because I feel it too, he said simply. And feelings don't lie. Her breath caught. The words seemed to strike her deeper than she expected, and for a long moment she just looked at him, as though memorizing his face in the shifting glow of the cabin. Then, softly, she whispered, Your turn. My turn. Yes. You've listened to my confession. Now give me yours. Armin hesitated, his chest tightening. There were things he rarely spoke aloud, pieces of himself he kept locked away. But under her gaze, under the weight of the storm and the closeness of the cabin, the walls he'd built began to crumble. I've been living half a life, he admitted slowly. Routine. Safe. Predictable. But empty. Every day felt like a repeat of the last, and I told myself it was enough. But it wasn't. That's why I got on this train. I didn't know what I was looking for: maybe freedom, maybe change. Maybe someone who could make me feel alive again. Selina's lips parted slightly, her expression unreadable. And have you found it? He swallowed, his pulse racing as the answer pressed at his lips. His gaze locked with hers, the heat between them undeniable now. Yes, he said, his voice rough. I think I have. For the first time, her composure faltered. She exhaled, slow and shaky, and her hand shifted ever so slightly toward his on the armrest. Their fingers brushed barely, softly, but the touch carried the weight of every word they had shared. The train rocked, thunder growled, and yet inside cabin 6 the storm reached its peak. Confessions had stripped them bare, leaving nothing to hide behind. Selina's eyes softened, her lips curving into the faintest smile. Careful, Armin. Words like that have consequences. He smiled back, his hand turning just enough that their fingers touched again, more firmly this time. Maybe that's what I've been waiting for. The storm outside raged on, but the greater storm was here in the small, dimly lit cabin, where 2 strangers sat closer than ever, their hearts beating in a rhythm that had nothing to do with the tracks beneath them. The rain had softened to a steady rhythm, tapping against the glass like a heartbeat. The thunder had rolled farther away, leaving only the dim golden glow of the cabin lamp and the muted song of the tracks beneath them. But inside cabin 6, the storm was far from over. Armin and Selina sat closer now, their knees touching without hesitation, their hands still half-linked from the moment before. Neither spoke, words seemed unnecessary. Instead, silence carried their conversation, silence filled with glances, with breaths that came quicker than before, with the weight of everything waiting just beneath the surface. Selina tilted her head, her eyes fixed on him as though searching for an answer she couldn't put into words. This is madness, she whispered, though her tone carried no intention of stopping. Maybe, Armin said softly. But maybe madness is exactly what we need. She laughed quietly, the sound almost lost in the rhythm of the train. You say things too easily. And you, he countered gently, make me believe them too easily. Her lips parted as if to respond, but no words came. Instead, her gaze dropped briefly to where their hands nearly intertwined. She hesitated, then slowly turned her palm upward, inviting, "Open." Armin didn't wait. He slid his fingers into hers, their hands fitting together with surprising ease, as though they had been waiting for this all along. The contact sent a rush through him, warmth, fire, a sensation that spread through every part of him. He tightened his grip slightly, afraid she might pull away, but she didn't. Instead, she leaned back into her seat, her eyes never leaving his. "It's strange," she murmured. "How quickly two strangers can forget they are strangers." Armin smiled, his thumb brushing lightly against her hand. "Stranger or not, I feel like I've known you longer than a single night." Her expression softened, the playful edge giving way to something tender. "Maybe that's the danger. When something feels this natural, it's harder to resist." The air between them grew heavier, almost tangible. Every detail magnified the warmth of her hand in his, the soft curve of her lips, the steady rise and fall of her breath. The cabin seemed smaller still, as though the walls leaned closer with every passing second. Another jolt of the train swayed them toward each other. This time, neither corrected the distance. Their shoulders brushed, then lingered. The proximity was dizzying, a temptation that wrapped around them like the night itself. Armin turned slightly, his voice low. "Selina," she closed her eyes briefly, as though savoring the sound. "Say it again." "Selina." The name rolled from his lips softer this time, almost reverent. Her eyes opened, meeting his, and the spark between them ignited brighter than before. For a moment, it seemed inevitable that the gap would close completely, that the current pulling them together would finally break free. But she held back, just barely, her lips curving into a knowing smile. "Careful, Armin. If you keep looking at me like that, there'll be no turning back." He leaned in, closer than he had yet dared, until he could feel the warmth of her breath against his skin. His voice dropped to a whisper. "What if I don't want to turn back?" Her breath trembled, her composure faltering under the weight of his nearness. The seconds stretched, suspended between restraint and surrender. Then, softly, she shifted her hand from his and rested it lightly on his arm. The touch was delicate, but it burned like fire. "Not yet," she murmured, though her tone carried more promise than refusal. Armin's chest tightened, torn between frustration and desire. But her eyes told him what her words did not. This was not rejection. This was the art of waiting, of drawing the tension higher, of letting the fire grow until it could no longer be contained. He exhaled slowly, leaning back just enough to give her space, though their closeness remained. The train rocked gently, their bodies still brushing with every sway, every curve of the track. Selina smiled faintly, her gaze soft but unrelenting. "The night is long, Armin. Sometimes anticipation is sweeter than the moment itself." He laughed under his breath, shaking his head. "You enjoy tormenting me, don't you?" "Maybe," she admitted playfully. "Or maybe I'm savoring this, whatever this is." Her words left a trail of warmth in the air, a promise that lingered between them. They sat in silence again, their hands finding each other once more, fingers interlocking in quiet defiance of everything else. Outside, the rain eased into a gentle drizzle. Inside, two souls sat in a cabin bound for nowhere certain, yet already knowing they were on a journey they could not forget. The night grew deeper, wrapping the world in shadow. The rain had faded, leaving behind the quiet hiss of water trailing down the glass. The train surged steadily forward, a lone vessel in the dark, carrying its passengers through landscapes unseen. But inside cabin 6, the storm raged on, louder than thunder, stronger than rain. Armin sat close enough to feel Selina's warmth, their hands still linked. Every time the train swayed, their shoulders brushed, and each subtle touch struck sparks that burned hotter than fire. He tried to steady his breathing, but the air in the cabin was heavy, charged with temptation. Selina's gaze lingered on him, calm yet piercing. "Do you ever wonder," she said softly, "why some people cross our path for only a moment, yet change everything?" Armin's chest tightened. "I've been wondering that since I stepped into this cabin." Her lips curved faintly. And I think," he whispered, "you're one of those people." The words seemed to unravel something in her. Her composure wavered, her eyes softening with emotion she hadn't shown before. For a moment, the playful spark that had defined her earlier melted into raw honesty. "Don't say that unless you mean it," she murmured. "I do," he said firmly, his hand tightening around hers. Every word. The silence that followed was heavier than ever. The air pulsed with the rhythm of their hearts, both quickened, both restless. Selina turned toward him, closing the last inches between them until her face was just a breath away. Her eyes locked with his, unflinching, daring him to move, daring him to surrender. Armin's throat went dry. The pull was irresistible. He could feel the warmth of her breath on his skin, the soft brush of her hair as the train jolted. His instincts screamed to close the distance, to finally claim the connection they had been dancing around all night. But she lingered there, so close yet just out of reach. "If we do this," she whispered, "there's no undoing it." "Then let it be done," he replied without hesitation. Her eyes flickered, torn between desire and restraint. The struggle was clear, the part of her that longed for escape, for freedom, clashing with the part that feared what surrender might mean. The train plunged into a tunnel, darkness swallowing the cabin. For a few seconds, there was nothing but the sound of wheels against steel and the closeness of two souls suspended in time. In that darkness, something shifted. Her hand slid higher along his arm, delicate yet deliberate, and her forehead brushed lightly against his. The contact was fleeting, soft as a secret, yet it sent a rush through him that left him breathless. When the light returned, her eyes were closed, her lips parted as though caught between hesitation and yearning. Armin's chest ached. He wanted her, no, he needed her. But something inside told him to wait, to let her choose. So he held still, giving her the space to decide. Seconds stretched into eternity. Finally, Selina opened her eyes, meeting his with an intensity that made the world beyond the cabin vanish. "You make it hard to resist," she whispered. "Then don't," he breathed. Her lips trembled, torn between a smile and surrender. She leaned closer still, their noses nearly brushing, their breaths mingling. The tension was unbearable, the moment poised on the edge of breaking. But at the last second, she pulled back just enough to stop the inevitable. Her hand slipped from his arm, returning to the armrest, though her gaze never left his. Armin exhaled, frustration and admiration colliding within him. "Why do you keep pulling away?" Selina's voice was quiet, but steady. "Because sometimes, wanting something is more powerful than having it." Her words struck deep, leaving him silent. He understood her meaning, even if he didn't agree. The fire between them wasn't fading, it was only being stretched thinner, tighter, threatening to snap at any moment. The train rocked gently on, carrying them through the night. Armin leaned back, his hand finding hers once more. She didn't resist. Their fingers intertwined again, tighter this time, as though neither wanted to let go despite the restraint. The storm outside had passed, but the storm inside the cabin was far from over. If anything, it had grown stronger, fiercer, more dangerous. And both of them knew the choice they had been circling could not be avoided forever. The train rattled steadily through the fading night, carrying its passengers toward dawn. In cabin 6, however, time felt different, slowed, suspended, fragile. Armin and Selina still sat close, their hands intertwined, their shoulders brushing with every sway of the carriage. The storm outside had ended, but inside, their hearts had not found peace. Selina leaned back against the window, her eyes heavy but awake, as though she fought sleep simply to hold on to these fleeting hours. "Morning is coming," she said quietly, her voice carrying a softness he hadn't heard before. Armin nodded, his gaze fixed on her profile in the dim golden light. "I know." She turned her head, meeting his eyes. "And when it does, this will end." The words struck him harder than thunder. He wanted to protest, to tell her that it didn't have to, but something in her gaze stopped him. It wasn't coldness, no, it was fear, perhaps, or resignation. "Does it have to end?" he asked gently. Her lips curved into a faint smile. "Everything on a train ends, Armin. Journeys are meant to take us somewhere, not keep us suspended forever." He squeezed her hand, unwilling to let go. "But not every journey feels like this." Her eyes softened, and she didn't argue. Instead, she shifted closer, her shoulder pressing against his firmly now, no longer shy. The warmth of her presence filled him, grounding him in the moment even as the tracks pulled them toward its inevitable close. They sat like that for a while, the silence more intimate than words. But eventually, Selina spoke again, her voice low, fragile. "I was afraid," she admitted. "Afraid that if I let myself give in tonight, I wouldn't be able to go back to who I was before." Armin's throat tightened. "And what's wrong with that?" She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You don't understand. My life, it's built on expectations, rules, promises I never wanted to make. If I let myself taste something real, I'd never survive going back to that." Her honesty sliced through him. He understood all too well. The emptiness of routine, the dull ache of unchosen paths he had lived them himself. That was why this night mattered. That was why he couldn't let her go so easily. He leaned closer, his voice a whisper meant only for her. "Then don't go back." She froze, her breath catching, her eyes searching his. "Armin, I mean it," he pressed. "Life doesn't have to stay the same. You said yourself you were running away tonight. Maybe you don't have to stop running." Her lips parted as though to reply, but no words came. Instead, she simply looked at him, her eyes full of a storm that mirrored his own desire, fear, longing, and something dangerously close to hope. The train swayed, pulling them closer. This time, there was no hesitation, no pulling back. Selina leaned in, her lips brushing his lightly, barely a kiss at first, more a question than an answer. Armin responded without thought, closing the distance, deepening it with a tenderness that carried all the restraint and all the fire of the night before. The kiss was soft, yet it burned hotter than anything he had ever known. It was the release of hours of tension, the culmination of every stolen glance, every whispered word. Time unraveled, the train, the storm, the world itself all fading until only this moment remained. When they parted, her forehead rested against his, her breath uneven. You make it too hard to leave, she whispered. Then don't, he urged again, his hand cupping hers tighter. But she only smiled faintly, sadness and sweetness tangled together. Not every story is meant to last beyond the night. Some are meant to remind us that we're still alive. The words tore at him, but he understood. She was giving him honesty, the same honesty that had bound them since the beginning. The train began to slow, brakes screeching softly as it approached the next station. The end had arrived sooner than either wanted. Selina stood, smoothing her coat, her movements graceful but heavy with finality. Armin rose too, unwilling to let the moment slip without something more. At the door, she turned, her hand lingering on the frame. Thank you, Armin. For reminding me I can still feel. He stepped closer, his voice steady though his heart trembled. And thank you for showing me life doesn't have to be empty. For a heartbeat, it seemed she might stay, might change her mind. But then the train halted, the door slid open, and the dawn light spilled into the cabin. She gave him one last smile, soft and unforgettable, before stepping into the platform crowd. Armin remained inside, the golden glow of the cabin already fading. But though she was gone, the night lingered within him, the storm, the confessions, the nearness. He knew his life would never be the same. And as the train carried him onward, he whispered her name into the quiet morning air. Selina.